have them specify the images or types of images that they're interested in, and then be able to download those images directly. And so nbia would then change the workflow in such a way that one would be able to get the images rapidly and securely and immediately without having to worry about removable media, and also wait the amount of time it takes to have images arrive in the mail. So I think probably the best way to demonstrate the National Biomedical Imaging Archive is to actually sign into it and show you some of the functionality and features of the system. So I'm going to move over to the web portal, and once we signed into nbia, it would bring us to this site, which allows us to be able to do searches. And so we have the capability of putting in search criteria. So I'm going to click, and we're first presented with a menu that allows us to be able to determine what types of studies we're interested in. So let's say hypothetically for this search we're interested in CT studies. So I'll click on CT and hit select. And then the next type of study, or the next thing that I'm interested in, is the anatomic site. So for this case we're just going to select chest images, and then I have the capability of being able to filter according to image slice thickness. So for the purposes of this search, I'd like to pick images that have relatively thin sections, and so I'm going to pick CT studies that have slice thickness of less than 4 millimeters, which means anywhere from less than 1 millimeter up to 3 millimeters. And then we have a number of different collections, including CT colonography, a collection called NCRI, which represents pathology images associated with a project on colon cancer MRI studies that we have with a group in the United Kingdom. The Osteoarthritis Initiative, phantom image studies, the RIDER and LIDC studies, and the studies from the Cancer Genome Atlas and virtual colonoscopy. So in this case I've selected studies from LIDC, which is a study of pulmonary lung nodules on CT. I'm not going to specify specific dates, but I have the option, if I wanted to be able to select a date range for the studies also. And I'm suggesting that I include series that are annotated and those that aren't annotated with image markup, such as measurements, etc. And so I'm going to submit this search criteria, and once I do that, then we get the first 10 studies that match the criteria. And so as you can see, I have something that looks a little bit like an Amazon.com type of shopping cart, and then I've got the capability of being able to click on studies that I'm interested in. And then once I've done that, I have the capability of being able to click Add to Basket. And once I've added it to the basket, I have the ability, if I wanted to save the query by typing in a name for the query, which I won't do right now. And we can review our criteria. So it's chest is the anatomic site, CT is the modality, LIDC is the collection, but we could have selected multiple collections. We're looking for thin CT slices, and we're going to return cases that include any of these modalities. We're not going to save this particular query, and then what I'm going to do is to select one of the studies that met that criteria, and then I'm going to ask it to add it to the basket, and then now I'm going to click View My Basket. And so now I've got the images associated with my basket, and then if I want, I can then either download these items, and then it will allow me to download them so that I can review them on my own DICOM medical imaging viewer, or if I want, I can visualize the images on the viewer that's associated with our instance, which is the National Cancer Institute's version of nbia. So I'm going to click on Visualize Images, and once I do that, then the system allows me to be able to go to the workstation that is associated with the nbia and brings up the imaging studies. And so here what you can see is a CT of the thorax. Here in the axial plane, this is the sagittal, and this is the coronal plane. And I can find a lesion, click on that lesion, and then here you can see the lesion depicted in the right lower lobe. And we can see it on the coronal section, and also see the crosshairs demonstrating it's located posteriorly in the right lower lobe on the sagittal images. You can see there's a necrotic portion of it. And then I've got the capability of being able to perform a measurement. So I can measure the width of this lesion on the axial image, and you can see that once I've done that, it records that measurement that I did, which is 12.3 millimeters. And I can measure any number of different lesions, and it will label them tumor 1, tumor 2, etc. There are a number of other features that are available on this workstation, and any of you who are using the National Cancer Institute's version of nbia have the capability of being able to take images that are already stored on the system and reviewing them on this particular workstation. And so it's a server-side rendering workstation. You can download the client for free on the nbia site, and then you've got the capability of being able to look at any of the imaging studies that we have, or if you have a collection that you want to have published up to NCI, then you can talk with us about the possibility of us hosting the study. The difference between the version of nbia that you would download to your institution and the NCI's is that we're using this Sedera iResponse thin client